What's the expectation this year? How do you take the next step from kind of setting some new records last season?
Well, I think you always want to make progress, but you'd like to be a part of a program that reaches a certain point where it's difficult to keep quote-unquote improving each year. It's kind of more of a standard you want to keep, and we're a long way away from that. So we're just kind of keeping it vague and being ambitious. But there's no question that the guys would like to take the momentum that they built last year and carry it into this year. And I think that pertains more just to the attitude and the expectations as opposed to the actual results, because, you know, last year we were able to accumulate a pretty good amount of wins.
Tony, where's Camden right now with his back, and where's in the mix?
He's good, and you know, he's anxious to start, as are most guys, especially if they can kind of smell that they're in the midst of the you know, action as far as earning one of those roles. But he's kind of a swing guy for us, to be honest with you, and I could see him doing a variety of things, closing a game if we need it, starting the game if we need it, and somewhere in between as well. So what he'll do the first weekend, I'm not sure. If the first weekend was to start tomorrow, we'd probably bring him out of the pen. But he's one of our most dynamic arms, and I've told him that multiple times, so we want to utilize him as best as we can.
You always dealt with that back thing this offseason. Have you seen his confidence grow, you know, even with that?
Yeah, I think there's nothing like, you know, being a second-year guy. You have a year to reflect on and lean on for experience, and then it's not you look down on the freshmen, but we're all in high school, and it felt good to not be on the very bottom tier of a lot of things. So he's got that natural confidence that a sophomore has, but also the built-in confidence of he's pitched, he knows the league, he's gained some weight, and his back issue is, you know, what it is. It's not that detrimental, but it's something he's just got to deal with. As you know, most of our guys in the lineup have one or two nicks or knacks that almost are never going to go away.
With Sewell kind of being a swing guy, who else is kind of in the mix with Crochet, Wallace for some of those weekend roles?
I think Sean Hunley is, you know, he started a regional game for us. He's certainly got to be mentioned. Elijah Pleasance has made the strides that we've expected, and, you know, one day soon, whether it's this year, second half, next year, I don't know, he's going to be an impact starter for us. You know, unfortunately, Jason Rackers would be mentioned in that group as a JUCO transfer. Jason's battling mono, so he'll be out at the very start of the season. And then Jackson Leith, who also comes to us from a junior college, is kind of in that same mold as Camden Sewell. He's got great stuff out of the pen, kind of that big league natured reliever where come in, air it out for 3 or 4 hitters with really big time stuff, or potentially, you know, space it out over a few innings as a starter. So it's nice to have some open competition, but also kind of know you got some guys to lean on.
Do you think Redmond will be a true closer, or do you think he's a guy that if it's a close game in the 7th inning, bases are loaded, then you'll probably rather bring him in there?
I think the college coaches I've learned from and the ones that are more experienced than me would all answer the same way that I'm thinking, and I'm kind of basing it off, you know, what they've done. And they've treated college baseball differently than pro baseball. Our season is, you know, about a third in length, you know, as a big league season. So the games are technically more valuable. So we can't afford to wait around till the 9th inning. And if there's a crucial moment in the 6th, 7th, or 8th, you go to the guy you think is most likely to get you out of that. Now, Frank's done such a good job, and I like the way our recruiting efforts have been boosted a little bit. Hopefully we've got options where you kind of have that guy who takes ownership of the 7th inning, or is, you know, the lefty-righty matchup guy, or whatever it might be. But a lot to be determined where guys fit in. It's nice the pitchers have established themselves as the strength of the group, but there's going to be some experimentation and some actual in-game experience before we can really say who's what.
What do you make of all the Astros stuff and sign stealing, trash can banging, and buzzers? And...
Yeah, it's a lot of things. Some of it's so out there it's hard to believe, but you know, where there's smoke there's fire, and there's also some true evidence of all those things. So there's a lot to it, and anyone that's played baseball has tried to probably get an edge on somebody one way or another, even if it's a gray area, maybe not necessarily cheating. So it's hard to point fingers at people, but the bottom line is it's a little disheartening for the game's sake to have people losing jobs, losing important games, losing rings and trophies, potentially over someone taking it that far. So it kind of tarnishes the deal like the steroid era did. But I think the league needs to take responsibility, and whatever you let go on is what's going to go on. And I know it's hard to police every little single thing, but with those real-time cameras being all over the place, I think if anything now it's been brought to everyone's attention, it needs to be policed as well as possible, so everything's on the up and up, and the true team that's supposed to win is the true team that's supposed to win.
You were around, obviously, during the World Series this year. Did you have any idea of anything like that?
Yeah, no speculation. And again, I've never seen anything that's really hardcore proof, but that team seems to have a lot of guys that really cut it loose, like overly aggressive swings, but they don't swing and miss that often or strike out that often. Carmen Tagano was the one who had the numbers. I think 4 straight years of highest slugging percentage compared to fewest strikeouts on one team. It's kind of an interesting statistic tied to that whole deal. So, obviously superbly talented guys. I don't think Bregman had pitches when he was wearing us out, at my old job. So, I hate to say they haven't accomplished things, but it'd be nice to get everybody back on a level playing field, even though some guys probably got sandpaper in their pitcher glove and things like that. But hopefully nothing too crazy going on beyond that.
More competition has kind of been a common theme today, people talking about just how deep do you feel like you are, especially compared to last season?
Well, there's some parity too. Andre was very evidently, our first 2 years here, one of our best or best player. And so it's a compliment, but it's also a challenge. I mean, if our guys were sitting here listening now, I'd say there's some parity. And if I was anxious to get innings, I would kind of take that as, like I said, a challenge. And I want to separate myself from the pack, track over there, runs, whatever. Maybe it's just a 1 mile run. You don't want everybody bunched up together. You do want everyone in shape well enough to finish a good time, but you'd like some separation. And that's what we're looking for the next couple weeks, and then even more so when the games start.
One of you guys mentioned earlier how after last season you felt like you should have been in the preseason rankings, and especially with so many SEC teams being in the top 25. What was the reaction of your team going into the season when they come up?
I kind of quiz our assistants because they're a little closer to these guys by nature. And there's just been very little talk of any of that stuff. And Garrett Crochet was in my office earlier today, and preseason stuff just doesn't carry that much weight for me, and maybe that's carried over to the team, but I think it's more about the hunger they have to pick up where we left off and try and do better. And that's just the honest truth. And Justin Smith, I remember, if you guys know that name, he was a defensive end in the NFL for quite some time. He was the best player when I was in college at Missouri, and he was preseason this and that all over the place. And he said, okay, that's great, I want to be that at the end of the season. And that was all he said in an interview that I remember very well. And so whatever it is we can hang our hat on, we'd like it to be at the end of the season and something that's actually kind of tangible. So I think that's where everyone's focus is at.
You walked onto the basketball court last night, and a lot of cheers. You kind of said, don't know why you're cheering, you haven't really done anything. How do you keep that mentality in this team to keep doing more?
Well, they built that up pretty good with, kind of drew out the whole thing, so they encouraged the crowd to cheer. But my comment just off the cuff was no one does it like Vol fans, and I've kind of used the Garth Brooks concert as an example, as crazy as that is. I mean, the guy's one of the biggest entertainers of all time, and the biggest crowd he's ever had has been where? Right across the street, and that's because the people in this state, if you do it right, they'll come out in droves and they'll treat it better than anyone else in the country. But that first step's very key. You've got to do it right. And we're still trying to kind of earn that name and respect, across the country, especially in the league, and then also with these people, so that they'll jump on board like they did when Peyton was our quarterback, when Coach Summit was here, and how the weeklies are doing with softball and countless other examples too.
Is there anybody throughout the lineup that will have a spot in the lineup on opening day?
That's hard to say, but Jordan Beck's a pretty polished hitter for a freshman. So if I were to go to a young guy or a new face for fans to recognize, he would be one. But he's kind of in that same deal, that parity group. There's so many outfielders that are having success for us in scrimmage play and drill work and things like that, it's going to be interesting to see, who's out there come conference time. We start to narrow things down a little bit, or as the season grows deeper towards May. Jake Rucker, I think, would be the more immediate answer to your question. He played the most last year as an underclassman, and he's continued to develop. And he's also a very good defender, so we can rely on that even if he's not having his best day offensively or best weekend. But it's been nice to see his strides, and I think he'll probably be the steady Eddie in the lineup, even though, it's not false promise. There'll be a lot of moving guys around early on.
How excited is Max Ferguson and all the things he can do, from running, hitting, different positions he can play?
I think he's excited he can get in that weight room and nobody can call him skinny or little guy anymore. It was Coach Q's quote all the time. I haven't heard that phrase little guy very often. And, really where he's put on that weight is the upper body. He's got a long frame, longer legs, so I'm sure the weight's been evenly distributed, but you just notice it in his upper body. And I think he's dying to get back out there in general because of the injury. But I also think he's anxious to get out there in a new capacity. More experienced. He's now seen as a team leader. He's solidified his spot a little bit, so I don't think he's stressing out about playing time. And then it's a new body in the uniform, and people will see it when they come out to the park. His work's been put in, and the numbers show it when we analyze those guys with the bod pod and all the fancy stuff we do. And I think it'll show in his performance too.
A lot of preseason hype around Garrett and Al this year for what they've done in the past. When you look at the leaders on this team, is that the expectation to have Garrett and Al being kind of the face of this team this year and then to lead the way?
I don't think the face, to be honest with you, but I do think Garrett is super talented on the mound, and he's really matured how he goes about his daily routines, which is so important for a pitcher. I mean, you could have a week in between starts, so it's kind of like, how do you prepare for an NFL opponent, or even Coach Pruitt doing that against guys. And he's really gotten strong in that area, and the guys see what he can do. I mean, he can pitch in the big leagues in about a year, if not sooner. So they expect him to take the ball to open the weekend for us. Probably will be our Friday guy to start. We'll see if that holds throughout the year. So I think they expect him to lead us out of the gates, but I don't think they see either of those guys as the face of the program, because I think there's some parity in that area too. We've got a lot of guys that lead in different ways, and Fergie's only a sophomore. He's one of those guys. Everyone knows Russell is the leader of the dancing that goes on in the locker room, but also how he plays out here. And I'd leave guys out if I continue to go on. So that's just the start of the conversation. And it's good for those guys to be recognized what they've done in the past. But, Mike Ditka said it. When I was younger growing up, my dad had me cheering for the Bears. Cowards live in the past. And so far, those guys have done nothing this year, which is, could come off as negative. But we also got a clean slate. That's a huge positive. Everybody's 0-0 right now. So as a donor friend of mine said last night, we're undefeated, so we're doing pretty good so far.
Pav and Gray, exchange time last year, do you see that going the same way, or have you seen any separation from those two?
Yeah, I think similar pattern. I think Pav has really made that jump that freshman to sophomore year you see in a lot of guys. That's just by nature where college kids make their biggest jump or their greatest growth comes from, and there's no doubt that's taken place. So, at this point, he's really solidified himself as, the guy that'll start on Friday to start the year at this point. But Landon's done very well after just an okay fall. He's done very well. Maybe he's got that wedding behind him. He's a married man now. And whatever is being done on his part, he's played well in January. And those two guys make us feel comfortable with that position behind the plate that we can count on both of them.